I'll be doing a little bit of confusion because actually that was the title, but then you'll see another title here. Because this speech is part of a dialogue that I like to engage with people, with readers and whatsoever. It's called Post-Literary World. It's an ongoing research that that I've initiated with MIT and Domus Academy in a joint venture of technology and humanists. Basically, I'm obsessed by what will happen to our beloved literary world. I think basically that we are already in a post-literary world. Readers have realized that, writers have not realized that. Let me tell you very shortly what is a literary world and what is a post-literary world with an example. A literary world is literature is made of words. In the literary world, in 1969, Oulipo, which was a group of very renowned and and writers of genius, basically, Italo Calvino, Raymond Queneau, Georges Perec, Henri Matthews, gathered up in Paris and in the late 60s, and it's actually existing today also. And they conceived a way of telling stories entirely dominated by constraints and an incredibly powerful use of words. That some of their fantastic researches are now completely inherent and like completely embodied in the semantics of web of Google. So when Google showed up and asked us to present a research for the Google Cultural Institute in Paris, they just sent a form and say, why Google, why Paris? And we said, why Google? Because Google is doing semantics of the web, basically based on words, not only words, obviously, but words are the bricks, essential bricks of it. And Oulipo was doing a sort of semantic of the web for literature in storytelling in the late 60s. And before you had a bunch of writers. Raymond Queneau was working for Gallimard, Georges Perec was one of the greatest French writers, Italo Calvino, you perfectly know. And these people just gathered up and conceived and dreamed and created this beautiful way of telling stories via constraints. Now, that same attitude toward words, an encyclopedic, mathematical, daring attitude towards words and storytelling is entirely in the hands of big data and Google and engine research. So I think that we basically need a complete rethinking of literary heritage, and that means also rewriting. It's more take a view from many rooms and less than a room with a view. So it's basically a challenge on tradition, and it's something that as a humanist lost at sea in the 21st century, this is really a sad story in a way. Most people like us are really seeing a sort of defeat and marginalization, and there are two ways to react to this defeat. The first is complaining, resentment, and the other is trying to swim. And I really like being lost at sea, and that's why I think I'm the only novelist that directs a design school in the world, probably. I want to talk to you today about 3 small projects that I've initiated, and basically one of them is just at this larval stage that contain the seeds of this reaction. I don't think it's a desperate reaction. I hope it's a creative reaction, an inventive reaction. I don't like the word creative. The first is the Reader Digested. It was conceived by me and Carlo Ratti and Matthew Claudel, and was just shortlisted for the Curate Award by Fondazione Prada and Qatar National Authority. It's an award that wants to recognize new curatorial practices. So ways of curating that are also outside the art system. The second is Write It Again, Sam. It's a competition that will be launching with Mubi.com, a fantastic digital enterprise founded by a guy called Efe Kaçorel, a Turkish guy who worked for 7 years for Goldman Sachs, which is a detail I always love. And actually, it's a Netflix of the niche. And what Mubi.com is doing is basically being the largest cinema d'essai in the world. if you want to see a Godard movie, if you want to see Agnes Varda movie, if you want to see a Fassbinder movie, or even obscurer names in the great epics of cinema, you can go to movie.com and you'll find it just as a theater, a theatrical proposal, just as a movie theater. And basically, they are fantastic. I met them once and I said, I have a right idea to promote some of your ideas and expand your audience also in Italy, because Italy is one of the places in which cinephilia has been born, and probably we need to reconnect the youngest audience with cinephilia. The third project is called The Whitest Cube, and is the most crazy one, and I'll tell you later about. Basically, these three projects are aimed at rewriting in as art projects, but also communication and research projects, literature, cinema, and art. How they do it. The Reader Digested first is basically an obsession about digital highlighting. I don't know if you ever tried, but if you read on Kindle, you happen to stumble upon highlighted phrases. Then Kindle tells you how many people have highlighted the same phrases that you highlighted. Then at a certain moment, I realized that if you enlist all the most highlighted phrases of Lolita, you have not a resume of Lolita, but a wonderful resonant harmonics of the book. Is something that the wisdom of the crowds has developed for you, and the algorithm of Amazon or Kindle have put in your hands. And it's not something that tells you the story of Lolita. It's something that gives you a very rapid immersion of Lolita. So if you mingle that together with the Wikipedia plot of Lolita, you have an actual almost orgasmic take on Lolita, which is appropriate, by the way. We're working pretty seriously on it. Don't ask me to explain this formula. It's basically something that we developed, that our researchers developed by counting and giving accounts of all the words, the sum of words highlighted in The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, Kindle edition, Anglo-American translation, and the phrases highlighted. Basically, they divided the most common used words like articles, preposition, etc., and the most meaningful words. This is the first and one of the most highlighted version phrases of Lolita. Obviously, the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful beginning of Lolita. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins. It's a beautiful phrase, but it's also pretty important to notice the fact that when not always the most highlighted phrases are telling the story, are bringing up the story. They basically are mirroring the spirit of the time, the zeitgeist. That's why I think that this highlighting, digital highlighting, big data meeting literature is really a beautiful key, an important key to see something that is intimate and sincere at the same time. When you highlight something, you do the simplest and the most intimate act of curation. Curate means to select and to heal. So by highlighting all the books in the world, we are kind of healing the world itself. We dream of an exhibition made of the best highlighted phrases in the world that constitute a substantial framework of inspirations for artists, for visual artists, for data artists. These are the most highlighted words from Jane Eyre by, and it's, I think it's, yes, because we did it for many novels. And if you try to do this game, you find a one book page. It's called One Book, The Reader Digested on Facebook. There are all these diagrams that we developed. And if you try to create phrases of, that have like sense, out of the most highlighted words, here you find the words that are matching together, the co-words, the association of words that have a meaning. It's always from the Kindle edition of Jane Eyre. Basically, you will basically do a kind of Oulipian exercise, and most of the phrases that you will develop by stealing some words out of this will give a sort of resume on resonant harmonics of the book. Let me jump to Write It Again, Sam. This is basically a very simple idea and something that already exists in the World Wide Web. It's a competition. We will launch it next month. £5,000 for the winner. Not much, but for many people who do like short films or young directors or teenager directors, this is a pretty good sum. And you can make a short film out of it now. It's basically to rewrite the storylines of films, of great films, by completely changing the meaning of subtitles. Basically, your brain, when you hear a movie in a language that is not your language, gives more importance to what you read in the subtitles than what you hear. So, in a way, by changing the subtitles, not a vandalization, because that's what usually happens now in the web. Basically, they use this kind of technique just to make trash alternative versions of movie, or like make comic or comedy effect or low comedy effect, basically trash. And that's why a lot of directors ask YouTube to remove it, and they succeed in removing those films. So basically, we developed this, Write It Again, Sam. We will ask people to exercise their screenwriting skills on 5 films that belongs to the history of cinema and whose rights are owned by Mubi, and will be judged by a jury of Oscar-winning directors. It's people like Bernardo Bertolucci has agreed on this, Ansur Obris, the curator, has agreed on this, and a lot of other people are converging on the idea that this is a nice way of making an homage to the history of cinema by changing the storylines and by putting yourself at the same level, if you are good, of Billy Wilder, Ingmar Bergman, and Jean-Luc Godard. And then we have the Whitest Cube. Basically, this is a very simple project, and it's, you know what the White Cube is. The White Cube is a gallery, and at the same time is the metaphor for every contemporary art gallery. We want to develop a Whitest Cube because we think that museums are the archbishops of a also almost religious system, which is vertical, very hierarchical, like the art system. We want to, this is the White Cube. The power of art system is basically the world of collectors. With money, you can buy Duchamp. It's a diminution, obviously, of the complexity of the art system and also the good values that it brings. But at the core of the art system is this simple diagram. We are in the position now to challenge this game. And we can challenge it not by like a soft revolution or hard revolution, but simply by proposing a small game, which is based on words. So it's time for the Whitest Cube, not the White Cube, but the Whitest Cube of 1 billion museums. It's a take on the art world entirely dominated by the power of words. Basically, what we are asking people is building a collective title operating system. What we are asking is to retitle all the works of art in the Western canon. That's why we are working with Google Art Project and the Google Cultural Institute. We will basically ask people to make a picture of an artwork, then fill some forms after with an app that we are developing with the MIT crazy guys, and there are some forms, one for nouns, one for adjectives, one for symbol, one for numbers. You basically use the Snapchat system, so you make a picture. If you don't put a creative, beautiful, inventive title, the picture disappears. If you put a very creative title, the picture remains your own. And so, through the power of words, then I tell you how we decide which is creative and which is not creative. And simply via the power of words, you have become a collector. Once you have amassed a significant number of works, you become a Whitest Cube. Your cube become the Whitest Cube. I'd like to show you something, which is basically this. You cannot read it because we are still developing this, and this is the moment in which it becomes successful. You pick up a work and just put a beautiful sequence of words. Here again, just words. Dominance of words and immersive, intelligent, interesting daring use of words. How we develop the algorithm that will decide if your title is good or not good? It's almost simple. We are asking 100 curators, critics, and other people of the art system, global, to retitle 50 works from Renaissance till now. Then, at the same time, we are putting in a big data whirlpool a sort of the highest number that we can of titles, of art titles, mixing the real titles, which is the title chosen by the artist, and new titles, rewritten titles by powerful, intelligent, interesting people in the art system. We can have a sort of good mix of what's good and what's not good. It's a challenge on the matters of taste, on inclusion and exclusion, and basically it's a game. What happens then, if you name this work a big red squishy wall thing, it can be a good title or cannot be a good title. The algorithm will decide. After you pick up a certain numbers of titles, you become a collector. But and our idea in the end would be to do a whitest cube exhibition just made of holograms, in which you can have 100, 4 works that are worth 100 millions dollars. These are basically works of art that can be retitled. Sorry? There are two ways. We are relying on Google Art Project, which is in itself a curation in a way. And on the other hand, on the titles proposed by, basically it's always arbitrary. We select 50 works of art from Renaissance till now that are representative of different threads. Yes. This is like a mirror of the art system itself. The art system is very brutal. It's very brutal because you cannot be a liar about it. You have to admit, we have to admit that our system is entirely dominated by money. But at the same time, it's the only place in which humanists like us can thrive in this moment. I know people, let me tell you an example. Sotheby's every week publishes a catalog of auction. These auction books are beautiful, incredibly informative, incredibly interesting books that are obviously based on the money factor, because obviously they are based on the leverage that they make on incredibly high prices and prices that are always rising and rising and rising. And this is a critical factor. But at the same time, they are employing art historians. They're giving you so much information about works of art that are often hidden because they are works of art not displayed in public museum. And there are many of these things. In my experience, the art world, the design art, architecture world has become a sort of port in which to land, because I'm lost at sea in a way, because I'm lost in a publishing world that is not exciting as it used to be. I'm sorry to say that, because there are plenty of incredible publishers. Two of my publishers of my previous books, and my agent is here. So I'm not telling that we live in a post-literary world with an excited and happy smile. I'm saying with a melancholy attitude, but at the same time a reaction. Because it's true that the mindset of writers, especially literary writers, is not able anymore to tell the complexity of a world that is entirely dominated by big data. And the highlighting project has exactly been developed by that, because we want to put a quantitative take on a world that is entirely dominated by qualitative option, and by a very narrow vision sometimes, which leads to a sort of continuous sequence of complainings, resentments, attacks, criticism about everything that's contemporary. One of the things that we will be giving a speech, a collective speech during the Festival Letteratura di Mantova, because we are courageous people and we want to be in the mouth of the lion, so where the readers are, not to offend the readers, because to offend the readers means to offend ourselves, but to say the real truth. Also because the readers have realized that, as I told. The problem is that many writers didn't understand until up to now, in my opinion, that they have to change completely their mindset. They have to become a little bit more traveling salesman of ideas, and less a room of your own and a view from your room. So basically, this idea of big data, of getting in a quantitative attitude, of getting into many young people rooms. Think of the Write It Again project. We are asking people to connect cinephilia with the nerdish mashup attitude of stupid teenagers who destroy the history of cinema by having like people in beautiful films speaking about Fiorentina, Lazio, or something like this, or soccer matches. And or Hitler speaking of soccer. This is not what we are going to do. We are going to use that beautiful intuition in a like skillful way, and basically in that way is a research project at the same time a communication project. So thank you very much. This is all being considered by the Institute for Production of Wonder, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Please stay with us other 2 minutes. Thank you, Gianluigi. Thank you in particular for showing such interesting ways to play with masterpiece, with literature and cinema. And I mean, with the help of imagination and new technology. And also to point out the role of curator that became important, so much important. Just a question. You're a writer. I mean, you're one of the most appreciated Italian writers, young writers. Can you define yourself post-writer?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a life project. This is not a cultural project. It's not a commercial project. This is basically the result of a shift that I made out of my own life. I decided not to be a literary person, but to bring the literary persona in another scheme. So I'm a visitor in a way.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gianluigi.